She let a stranger touch her child's head as a little girl. Her mother said nothing. And now, at the edge of womanhood, something unseen begins to follow her. Curses don't always come loudly. Sometimes they sit in silence, waiting. Parents, be careful who lays hands on your children. Because what she finds at the end of this story, it's not just haunting, it's a warning. Sit back, pay attention, and receive this message. It was an unusual night. The cold Lagos breeze swept through the narrow alleys of Ajagunle, where the bustling noise usually drowned out any whispers. But tonight was different. Bisi, barely 18, stood by her window, eyes wide and restless. She watched as her mother, Bisi, tiptoed out of the house, her wrapper tightly tied around her waist, her face hidden under a scarf. Bisi leaned out slightly. "Mama, where are you going?" she called softly, not wanting to wake the others. "I'm going to the market, my dear," Bisi replied, her voice almost too hurried. "At this time? But it's not even dawn yet," Bisi said, confused. An, Bisi, don't worry," Bisi chuckled nervously. "Just go back inside." Bisi frowned, sensing something was amiss, but she said nothing more. She closed the window slowly, watching as her mother disappeared into the night. The next morning, Bisi couldn't shake off the unease. She sat on the worn-out couch, picking at her plate of boiled yam absent-mindedly. Her brother, Tunde, looked over. "Sister Bisi, you look like you saw a ghost." "What's wrong?" Tunde asked, concern in his voice. "It's nothing. Just Mama acting strange," Bisi replied, stirring her food around her plate. "But she's always running about," Tunde shrugged, taking a big bite of his yam. This was different. "I can't explain it, Tunde," Bisi insisted, rubbing her forehead. "It's like there's something she's not telling us." Tunde paused, his chewing slow. "You know how Mama is. She's always full of surprises." Bisi sighed, nodding lightly. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just any surprise. Later that day, while Bisi swept the tiny living room, a soft knock echoed from the wooden front door. She opened it to find Mrs. Ada, their neighbor, standing with a wide grin. "Bisi, how are you, my dear?" Mrs. Ada asked, adjusting her jella. "I'm fine, Ma," Bisi replied politely, moving aside to let her in. "Where is your mother?" Mrs. Ada asked, glancing around the room. "She went out early, she didn't say where," Bisi said, her curiosity piqued. "Ah, I see." Mrs. Ada nodded knowingly. "Well, tell her I stopped by, En?" "Yes, Ma," Bisi agreed, watching the older woman leave, puzzled by her sudden visit. At dusk, Bisi returned home, looking more exhausted than usual. She settled into an old chair, sighing heavily. "Mama, is everything okay?" Bisi asked carefully, hoping for answers. Bisi hesitated, then forced a smile. "Of course, my dear. Why wouldn't it be?" "You know I saw you leaving last night, right?" Bisi pressed, watching her mother's reaction. Bisi. Sometimes a woman has to do things to protect her family." Bisi responded cryptically, shifting in her seat. Bisi frowned. "What does that mean?" she asked. But Bisi only shook her head. "Lade, you'll understand. Let's have dinner," Bisi said, ending the conversation abruptly. Despite Bisi's reassurances, Bisi's dreams were filled with chaos that night. Flashes of strange faces and voices, including a man's face she couldn't recognize, touched her head in her dreams. She awoke in a sweat, gasping for air. "Mama!" she called out, rushing to her mother's room, but found it empty yet again. Sitting on the bed, Bisi's heart pounded, trying to piece together what was happening. At breakfast, Bisi confided her dream to Tunda, her need for answers growing. Tunda, do you ever feel like things are off? She asked, hoping he would understand. But Tunda just laughed. You're always worrying. Maybe it's just stress. No, Tunde. I think it all started when that man at Papa Oni's store touched my head when I was little. Mama was so upset, Bisi explained, gripping her cup tightly. Tunda nodded slowly, beginning to absorb her concern. Do you think it's related? Bisi sighed. I can't shake the feeling. It's like there's a link between those dreams and Mama's recent behavior. The siblings decided to talk to their uncle, Baba Benga, known for his wisdom and insight into family matters. They visited him that afternoon. Baba Benga, there's something troubling us, Bisi began, feeling the weight of the words. Baba Benga listened intently as they described the strange happenings. You say a man touched your head years ago? He asked, narrowing his eyes thoughtfully. Yes, Bisi replied, and lately things have been going wrong, and Mama is keeping secrets. Baba Benga sat back, folding his arms. It's possible, he began, choosing his words carefully, that the touch wasn't ordinary. Sometimes there's more than meets the eye. I've heard of instances where… His voice trailed off, and Bisi leaned in closer. Where what, Baba? Where such things bring spiritual troubles, he concluded, his voice low. Your mother might be trying to protect you. Bisi exchanged a worried glance with Tunde, her heart heavy with a mix of fear and relief. That night, Bisi confronted Bisi again, determined to uncover the truth. Mama, she said slowly, I need to know about that man who touched me years ago. Bisi's eyes widened. Panic flashed across her face. Bisi, you mustn't dwell on such things. I need to understand, Mama. Baba Benga mentioned spiritual troubles, Bisi persisted. Bisi sighed deeply. It's true. I've been trying to find a way to lift whatever might have been done. Bisi, that man was not ordinary, Bisi confessed, her voice trembling. I didn't tell you because you were too young. So I was right, Bisi asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Bisi replied. Everything started changing soon after. Is that why you're always sneaking out? Bisi asked, piecing the puzzle together. Bisi nodded slowly, her eyes full of sorrow. I was seeking help, my dear. Together, they decided it was time to see a pastor who was known for dealing with such spiritual matters. Pastor Coyote is renowned, Bisi explained, hope in her eyes. He can pray over the situation. Bisi felt a sense of relief and fear mixed together, wondering if it would finally bring peace. All right, Mama. Let's do what we must, Bisi said, with newfound determination. The next morning, they went to Pastor Coyote's church, gripping each other's hands tightly. Pastor Coyote welcomed them warmly. You've come to the right place, he assured. As they sat in his small office, he listened intently to Bisi's story, nodding thoughtfully. Yours is not a simple case, Pastor Coyote started, but the power of prayer can break any chain. Bisi nodded, hanging on to his every word. What should I do, Pastor? We will start with a deliverance prayer, he explained. Are you ready to fight this battle? Bisi looked at Bisi, then back at Pastor Coyote. Yes, I'm ready. They knelt together in prayer, and Pastor Coyote began his powerful deliverance session. The air felt charged with energy, and Bisi felt a warmth spreading through her body. Voices echoed, and she saw flashes of the man once more in her mind. But this time, it was different. She felt empowered, ready to overcome whatever darkness lingered. With every prayer uttered, the air seemed to clear, and Bisi's heart felt lighter than it had in years. As they left the church, Bisi turned to Bisi. "Do you think it's over?" she asked, hope and uncertainty in her eyes. Bisi smiled softly. "With God on our side, there's always hope." But just as they reached their doorstep, they found something unexpected waiting for them, a small, mysterious package addressed to Bisi. Bisi picked it up, turning it over in her hands, her heart racing once more. "Mama," she whispered, eyes fixed on the parcel. "What if it's not over yet?" The mysterious package weighed heavily in Bisi's hands as she and Bisi stood at the door. Bisi turned it over, searching for any identifying marks, but found none. "Mama, should we open it?" she asked, her voice cloaked with apprehension. Bisi looked at her daughter, unsure. "It might be dangerous, but we need to know." With bated breath, they carried the package inside and sat at the small dining table. Bisi carefully unwrapped it until they found a small, intricately designed wooden box. "It's beautiful," Bisi whispered, running her fingers over the carvings. "But why leave it here?" Bisi wondered, her heart pounding. Gingerly, Bisi opened the box, and they both gasped. Inside lay an old photograph of Bisi as a young woman holding a baby. Alongside it was a small note, handwritten in a script they struggled to recognize. "What does it say, Mama?" Bisi asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. Bisi squinted, then read aloud. "The past cannot be changed, but the future is yours to shape. Remember the promise." Bisi furrowed her brow. "What promise? And who sent this?" Bisi shook her head, tears welling up. "This photograph. It was taken the day you were born, but it was stolen, along with other things, many years ago." Tunda entered just then, sensing the tension in the air. "What's going on?" Bisi handed him the note. "Look at this." As Tunda read, confusion and concern swept across his face. "What promise are they talking about?" Bisi took a deep breath. "There was a man. He helped me when I was desperate. I promised him something in return, but after that incident with you, Bisi, I lost contact." "Do you think he's back?" Bisi asked, fear tingling down her spine. "He might be," Bisi nodded, voice trembling. "But why now?" The uncertainty gnawed at them, refusing to let go. Bisi decided they needed more help to unravel the mystery. That evening, they returned to Baba Gbenga's house. "Baba," Bisi started, showcasing the photograph and the note. "Can you help us? Things have become more complicated." Baba Gbenga examined the items carefully before speaking. "This is a reminder, a connection to the past, but it holds a clue for a decision you must make now." "What decision, Baba?" Tunde asked, impatient for answers. Baba Gbenga's eyes softened. "To either fulfill an old promise or allow the past to fade away. But be careful, for each path has its challenges." Back at home, Bisi pondered over the words. "Mama, what was the promise? Perhaps we can undo this." Bisi hesitated, then confessed. "I promised him gratitude and a favor in return. I was naive, Bisi. I was just focused on our survival." "Can we find him?" Tunda inquired, a mix of curiosity and caution in his voice. "I don't know where to start," Bisi admitted. a sense of helplessness washing over her. Bisi suggested they return to Pastor Coyote for guidance. He helped before. Maybe he can again. Though reluctant, Bisi agreed. It might give us some direction. The next day, they visited Pastor Coyote's church. As they sat in his office once more, Bisi laid out the photograph and note. Pastor Coyote examined them thoughtfully. These are significant. The man you speak of might still have some influence over your lives. How do we break free from this? Bisi asked, desperate for a solution. Pastor Coyote leaned in, his voice calm yet serious. With prayer and clarity of heart, you must be willing to face the past head on. Bisi clasped her hands tightly. But what if he asks for something impossible? Faith and persistence, Pastor Coyote replied. You must prepare for any outcome. That evening, Bisi and Tunda sat outside, discussing their next steps. Maybe we should retrace Mama's steps, Tunda suggested. Bisi nodded. It's worth a try. We have to protect Mama and ourselves. What if it leads us nowhere? Tunda wondered aloud. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, Bisi replied firmly. Their resolve steeled, they re-entered the house where Bisi was resting. Mama, we'll find a way out of this. Together, Bisi promised. Bisi smiled weakly. I trust you both, but be careful. The next morning, Bisi and Tunda ventured into the bustling streets of Lagos, determined to uncover more about the mysterious man who had once touched their lives. They started at local markets, asking discreetly about old acquaintances of Bisi. Hours passed without success, until one elderly vendor finally recognized the photograph. Ah, yes. He was once a well-known healer, she recalled, but he moved to a village not far from here. Do you recall its name? Tunda asked, hope shining in his eyes. Emur, she replied, but be cautious. He mingles with deep forces. Before setting off, Bisi, Tunde, and Bisi prayed for guidance. As they travelled to Emur village, uncertainty loomed over them, yet they pressed on. Upon reaching Emura, they followed the villagers' directions to a small, secluded hut, surrounded by thick bush. Taking a deep breath, Bisi knocked on the door. Moments later, an aged man with wise eyes opened, the very same man from Bisi's dreams. "You've found me," he said, recognition flickering in his gaze. "I wondered when you'd come." Inviting them inside his modest home, the man introduced himself as Adebayo. "I knew this day would come, when the past sought resolution," he spoke, voice soft yet firm. Bisi watched him warily. "What truth do we need to uncover?" Adebayo explained. The touch was never meant to harm. It was to protect Bisi with a binding charm, ensuring your lineage would never come to misfortune. But it required an old promise to be fulfilled. Bisi and Tunda exchanged glances, new understanding dawning. So it was never malevolent? No, it was not, Adebayo assured. But promises hold power. They cannot be forgotten. Bisi felt a rush of relief mingled with frustration. Then how do we finally break free? By fulfilling what was started, Adebayo revealed. Your family owes a continuation of goodwill, a gesture that breaks cycle. Bisi nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his words. We will fulfill it. How do we start? Adebayo smiled, his expression serene. With kindness, shared freely, with no expectation, it shall release you. Bisi squeezed Bisi's hand, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Adebayo. Returning home from Emura, Bisi and her family carried with them a quiet sense of peace. Adebayo's words echoed in their hearts, and they began making small gestures of kindness in their community, sharing food, helping neighbors, and offering encouragement. It felt like the storm had passed. One evening, as twilight wrapped the village in gold, Bisi sat peeling yams while Bisi and Tunde played a quiet game of cards. A knock came at the door. It was a delivery boy with a note, sealed with an unfamiliar symbol. Bisi opened it slowly. Inside was a short message. "You've done well keeping the curse alive. Payment to both parties has been confirmed. Let her continue to believe she is free. AK." Bisi froze. Her heart dropped as she read the initials again. AK. Her hand trembled. "Mama," she whispered, this is from Pastor Coyote." Bisi looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" Bisi handed her the note. "And look, both parties, that means Adebayo too." The room fell silent. Tunda's eyes widened. "So, they planned all this?" Just then, the lantern flickered. A gust of cold air blew through the open window. The faint sound of a man's laughter, distant, echoing, drifted in from outside. Bisi turned toward the door, her voice barely audible. "What did they do to me?" This story spoke deeply about the dangers of allowing strangers to put their hands on your children. For part 2, don't forget to smash that like button. Although Bisi's example isn't clear yet in its conclusion, you can be sure part 2 will really reveal some hidden secrets in this tale. This should be a lesson to all parents. Be careful who you allow to rest their hands on your children's heads, because you don't know whether they are blessing them or cursing them. Thank you for listening to this message. I hope you enjoyed. For part 2, and for more stories like this interesting tale, please check out the other videos on our channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and get ready for part 2 coming soon.